Hi everyone, this is Ashley with CT Marina Digitals. I am going to show you a couple of different tutorials on how to use my new walls and wainscoting digital backdrops in Photoshop. I have open a few different images that I'm going to do edits with just to show a few different ways to use them. The first one I'm going to do is if you just want to use the whole backdrop as the entire image and not just a part of it. So I already have my subject over here. I just went up and clicked my quick selection tool and select subject, and it went ahead and selected her for me. If you're doing this, always zoom in to make sure that it's selecting all of your subject, because you can't really go back and paint it in like you do if you're placing a backdrop behind your subject in an image that your subject is already in. So it's important to make sure that it's all selected. Okay, so now I'm going to go to edit and copy, over to my image, edit and paste. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to click on the box right here and make sure that this is selected because I want to keep my proportions. I try to scale with unless you're doing like a abstract backdrops with florals or like life size, I try to scale my subject like to what's in the photo. So like the doorway here. It's a smaller doorway, but obviously she would still need to fit through it, so I would make her about this size, but if I'm going to move her closer to the camera, I could make her a little bit bigger. I think right there is good. First things first, I want to make sure that the light's coming from the same way, which it is, and on the backdrop and on my subject. I'm going to paint my shadows in first, so I'm going to create a layer above my background, and I'm going to change it to multiply blending mode. And then I'm going to do about the size of the width coming off of her body this way. I'm going to do 100% opacity. I already hold down Alt, and you can select a dark part of the floor, and then just go ahead and paint in. I want my shadow on the floor, but I also want it to go up the wall because the light is coming from this way, so her shadow would be on the wall as well. And then I'm just going to paint in, you know, kind of her body shape, what it would be. And create my layer mask and brush off. I usually like to lower my opacity for this and brush off little by little on areas that I feel like are too much shadow. And I also thin this out a little bit. Don't want my shadow on the wall back here to be as dark, because it would start to taper off the further away she is. Lower the opacity just a bit. Okay, so I'm happy with that shadow. I'm going to add a new layer. I like to do my shadows on separate layers so I can work with them individually. I'm going to make my brush smaller. I'm going to go back up to 100%, make sure it's on multiply blending mode, and I'm going to add in some shadows at her feet. And just a little at her dress there. always want to feather out your shadows. You don't want them to be like just doing like a big like shadow around like this. Don't do that, because the light is gonna, that shadow wouldn't be there because of the way the light is falling on her. You want to be realistic with your shadows. Okay, so I'm happy. Actually, I'm going to create one more multiply blending mode. And I'm going to add just a little bit more right there. Okay, so I'm happy with my shadows. Now I'm going to go on my subject and create a layer mask. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. I'm going to do 100% for now. And brush off, I'm actually going to go down to like 24 and brush off little by little around her hair here. Just getting my edges cleaned up here. Just going to get rid of that curl right there altogether. Don't want to do too much. I usually don't really touch their face at all. And then I just want to go around and make sure that my edges are clean. See, this back here did not clean up very well, so I want to clean that up. I don't do this perfect for tutorials, just to give an idea of what to do without trying to take too much time for tutorial's sake. Okay. Now I do want to brush off these dark outlines of her feet and toenails here. And the wrap, she was on a black backdrop to begin with, so these would not be as harsh on this floor. Okay, I think fix this right here. I'm happy with that. Okay, and sometimes I add coolness or warmth to the subject. I think that she matches this backdrop pretty good. The only thing I might do is grab my dodge tool on shadows and take away some of the shadow on her leg, because like I said, she's not on as dark of a backdrop here as she was in the original. And then if you want, you can go in and add, so after I clean her up, I like to add a new layer and merge those two, just so I can get that flat layer again. You could go around with your blur tool. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. And just blend in, especially the hair, sometimes it helps to blend it into the backdrop a little bit more. These edges that have like kind of darker lines, you can get rid of that just by adding a little bit of blur, but still keeping the parts of her in the image that you want sharp. Her toes, blur those a little bit. The wrap. Okay, and then I want to add blur to the backdrop, because the backdrop would not be sharp like this if I was just focused on my subject. There would at least be a little bit of blur. Obviously, it would depend on your focal length, but I'm going to duplicate my background layer. I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'm not going to add a ton. I think I'm only going to do, say, let's see what 4 looks like. I think I'm going to do 4. Press OK, and then create that layer mask. Black brush at 100% opacity, and brush it off of the plane that she is standing on. If you need to brush it back in, you can use your white brush to brush it, back in certain areas. Okay, and then I might do an adjustment layer, curves, create that clipping mask by clicking right here. I might just add a little bit more light to her, but not much. Okay, and then I would be done with that one. So before and after for that one. You could play around with your shadows a little bit more, the shape, but I'm just going to leave that where it is for now. Okay, so next one, I want to use this backdrop. This is, when you're putting it on the backdrop of an image, these are obviously going to work better if you have a landscape, if it's landscape version or horizontal. So I'm going to actually extend this way. I want to make sure that content aware is clicked up here. And then I'm going to drag these out. And then I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Because I do want her to be bigger in this image compared to the rest. Okay, I'm going to click OK. Wait for Photoshop and Content Aware to fill in those sides. Sometimes it works great, other times you need to clean it up a bit, but we're going to be overlaying a backdrop, so it's not going to matter so much. Okay, see that did pretty good. There's a couple spots over here that are iffy, but I'm not worried about that. So I want to use not that one. I want to use this one for this backdrop. I already went ahead and selected, just with my rectangle marquee, the part of the image that I want to use. I don't want to use the whole digital backdrop for this one. So I'm going to go up to Edit and Copy, Edit and Paste into my image. I'm going to grab my Resize tool, or my Move tool, whatever you want to call it. And I want to put it where my wall would start, which would be like about right here. Okay, and I can already tell that the light's coming from the opposite side, so I'm going to right click for some reason today, maybe you guys know, but I don't know why. There it is. Flip horizontal and click OK. I'm going to hide that for now. I'm going to go to my background layer. I'm going to go to my select tool, select subject. And normally I would zoom in, make sure that it's selected really good, but I'm just going to skip that part. I'm going to duplicate the layer, create a layer mask, press Control or Command I on my keyboard and invert that layer. And then create a clipping mask. You could just right click, create clipping mask, or you could hold down Alt and click between the layers. You can unclip and clip masks that way. And now obviously too bright, not the right shade. I first of all want to, anytime you do work to the digital backdrop, you want to unclip it. You want to do all the work to that before you're clipping it behind your backdrop. And you can unclip it and clip it as many times as you want. I'm going to create a curves layer on this, and I'm going to bring down, make it darker. Okay, I'm going to merge those. I'm going to create that clipping mask again and put it behind her. I'm going to lower the opacity, and that's going to allow it to blend a little bit more into my backdrop. Okay, and so the backdrop color is a little bit more dull than the color on her. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this layer, and I'm going to go ahead and do a hue saturation layer. I'm going to bring down the saturation of my cyans. I'm going to bring down the saturation of my yellows. Not too much. I'm going to bring down the saturation of my greens and my blues. And as you can see, that made it so the backdrop is matching much better to the backdrop. Okay, so now I also want to add some blur to the digital because she's standing way in front of it, so there would be some depth there. Blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to add, I think, about 5 here for this one. Okay, and now as you can see, there's some shadow over here on the digital, so I kind of want to add that shadow. I want it to match, so I'm going to click on my backdrop layer. I'm going to go to my burn tool. You could also create a layer in multiply blending mode to do this too, but I'm just going to use this for now. I want my floor to match a little bit better with the shadows on my digital. Click on my digital, and I'm going to do the same that way. This floor needs to be darker in certain spots. Go back and forth with that. Add a little bit of shadow right there where it meets the floor. Okay, you can play around with the opacity. And now it's a little bit, my backdrop's a little bit dull looking too. So I want to add some clarity to it. So I'm going to go up to Filter, Camera Raw. And I'm going to add some clarity. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of contrast as well. Not much, just a little bit. And let's see. Added a little. I'm actually going to go ahead and just do that again. Filter, Camera Raw. There we go. And then I think I'm going to add a little bit more blur too. And then I'm also going to go to my burn tool again to my shadows. I still don't like how bright this is down here, so I'm actually going to go to my midtones. I'm just going to brush that down just a little bit. Okay, so now cleaning the subject up, you want to zoom in and look at the area. So you would use this layer mask that's already there and use your black and white brush at 100% opacity to brush on or off and clean up your edges. I'm not going to go crazy on that, like so the hair, I would lower that opacity a lot and just brush that in little by little. The hair can take time sometimes. Just going to do it quickly for tutorial's sake. Okay, you see her shoulder right here, so I would go back to my black brush, 100% opacity, and brush that off of her shoulder. Oops, I need to brush off, not on. Okay, and there's more spots that need cleaned up here, but I'm going to skip it for now. You guys get the gist of it. But I do want to show, she does have a see-through gown, which this would show through a little bit. So I'm going to go to my white brush, get a little bit bigger. I'm going to do like 20% opacity and just brush it off tiny bit in certain spots just to be so that wainscoting on that backdrop is just peeking through, because you should be able to see that if that was actually in the image. And that's where the floor would come in again. Okay, so that's all. I'm actually going to take that one away. That's all I would do with that. I might extend it a little bit up there. There we go. Okay, and I would be happy with that. That's very pretty. If you want, you can play around with actually I might flatten and then even do like a new layer put my brush at like 10% opacity and grab a muted color, darker color from over here, and just kind of brush it on to the sides just to blend the floor with the backdrop a little bit better. Okay. So before and after. And I might come back to and work on that one a little bit more, but that's the gist of it. I want to unflatten that so I can come back and work on it. Okay. This is a family image. I'm not going to extend the backdrop on this one. Kind of the same idea as the last one I just did. Go ahead and select subject. Duplicate my image, layer mask, Control or Command I to invert. Select, I'm gonna only use this part of my image. Copy and paste and move. I would want it about right there, but there I'm kind of zoomed in on them, so I want it to look realistic too. I'm going to move it up a little. Okay. Light is coming from the opposite way again. So I'm going to flip that horizontal. I already know that I'm going to want it to be darker, so I'm going to add a curves layer before I clip it. Bring that down. Merge those two layers. Create that clipping mask to put it behind them. I'm going to add my blur. And I can already tell that it muted them a little bit, so I'm going to click on my backdrop layer and I'm going to go up to Filter and Camera Raw. I'm going to add some contrast and clarity. That's going to do it to my backdrop, and then I'm also going to click on the very bottom layer and do it again, and that's going to do it to my subjects. Okay, and then I also, this backdrop's very warm, and I want them to be a little bit warmer as well. So I'm just going to add a color balance layer, drag to the yellows a little bit, drag to the red a little bit. As you can see, that added some warmth to them, so they're not so cool compared to the backdrop. They'll blend now. Zoom in and clean up my edges. Once again, I'm not going to take a ton of time doing this. For tutorial's sake, 100%. You are brushing off and brushing on. Black to brush that backdrop off of your subjects, and white to brush it on. Actually, I've selected, masked it pretty good on its own. Oop, too much there. Look at that baby, so cute. Oop. Okay. I could go around, I'm just going to quickly go around the whole image. Like, I would clean all this up so there's not that mark there, or when you go back in and add that blur, if you're gonna, that's gonna help a lot too. You don't have to worry about down here because it didn't start, the backdrop doesn't start until up here. I think, what is that right there? Let's get that off of there. I think that might be Dad's leg, actually, maybe. Okay, zoom out. And then I want to add, I'm going to click on my overlay. I'm going to do dodge on shadows, and I'm just going to brighten this area up a little bit over here, just to match the floor. I'm going to go to my backdrop and my burn tool and add some shadows. where it meets. And then I'm going to go to my overlay again, add some more shadows in there on midtones, shadows, and highlights. I could also create a layer and clip it to there, multiply, grab my brush at about 20%, grab a dark shadow there and brush that in a little. Just want it to be a little bit darker behind them there. I think that's a pretty one. Oop, I accidentally just, I don't know why that's sticking because I didn't click it. Oh, there we go. Okay. I don't know, it just froze there for a second. So, before and after. Totally different image. Okay, last one I'm going to do is white. I like to do darker images that are typically my style, and then I'll do some white ones as well. Again, I'm only using a part of this backdrop. I already selected the part I want to use with my rectangle marquee, so I'm going to go up to Edit, Copy, and Edit and Paste into my image. I'm going to resize this to match my wall. Zoom in a little bit here. Drag it up. There's just a part that I'm going to have to brush off of there in a little bit, and that's okay. Okay. Hide that for now. I'm going to click her and select her and mask it so I can get the backdrop behind her. Using white backdrop, this is where blending modes can come in. I'm going to select this right here because it didn't. Or you can just lower the opacity. Okay, so I think I'm going to use multiply blending mode and lower the opacity. So I'm going to put it behind her by creating that clipping mask. I'm going to lower my opacity. I'm actually going to unclip. I'm going to go up to adjustments, curves, clip that to there by clicking that, and I'm going to up my curves a little bit. I think also contrast. Then I'm going to merge those layers. You can duplicate layers. I'm going to go back. I don't want to merge those just yet, actually. I want to create a layer mask on here. And I'm going to use, 20% is good. I'm just going to brush off. I'm going to go up to like 40%. These edges. So it blends better with the corner of my wall. And then I'm going to brush off this top and bottom just a bit, because you can already see the creases in my ceiling. So I kind of want to play off of those more so than the overlay. I'm going to go back to my curves layer, and I'm going to bring that down just a little. Okay. I'm going to go to this, to my backdrop again. I'm going to use a smaller brush at 100% because I don't want this floor on there. I want it to be the plain white floor that I'm working with, that she's standing on. I could have just taken her and edited her into this entire backdrop, but I didn't want the look of that. I wanted the look of the backdrop she's already on. Brush it back on right there. Okay. Okay, now place that behind her. Merge those layers, sorry. Then place it behind her. Oop, Already was. My eyes are playing tricks on me. Okay, and then I'm going to go up to my blur tool. And I don't want to add too much here. Just enough. And then if you want, you can duplicate that layer again and play around with the opacity if you want it to be a little bit darker. I would probably leave it on that, and then I would go up to filter and camera raw and maybe just add a little bit of clarity. Looks good. I'll grab my burn tool on shadow, my dodge tool on shadows and get rid of some of those darker shadows on the door since this is such a bright backdrop that I'm working with. Just blend this a little bit more up here. Okay, before and after. Totally different look without adding too much to it. Again, if you were to work more with this with your like adjustment layers, you want to unclip this. Like if I wanted to add some levels, just make it a little bit darker, or if I wanted to add some saturation, I would do that and then I would merge these and put it behind her. I actually do want to add, my backdrop's a lot cooler than my digital backdrop, I'm just noticing that. So I would go click on her, add a color balance. I could either add coolness to the backdrop or to the digital backdrop or warmth to her and my original backdrop, but I'm going to add warmth. So I'm just going to drag this to the yellow, drag this to the red. And that looks a lot better. That flows a lot easier with the backdrop I'm using. I would probably go as far as using my color change action and making her wrap like a tan color instead of, or like a green would be really pretty instead of the silver. But yeah, that is it. Bunch of different samples. If you have any questions, you can message me on Etsy. If you are a studio photographer, I would love for you to join my group on Facebook. It is linked in the description.